Senator Bill Cassidy joins us now. Good morning, Mr. Senator. How are you?
I'm great, Tommy. How are you, man?
Man, let me tell you something. It always seems like you're hustling and bustling doing business in the Capitol, are you?
I'm doing my best. I was sent there for a mission, and I do my best every single day to make sure I fulfill that mission.
It just seems like you're always in the background, just working, which is what you're supposed to do, I guess. Tell me,
Go
ahead. I'm sorry.
Ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, you want to work in the background, but then you want it to pop. We're trying to lower drug costs, for example.
Right.
And so now we're starting to introduce bills that will introduce a whole bunch. Bipartisan, by the way, because I want them to pass, not just be about message. And we hope that folks will begin to see their drug costs come down because of some of the work we've been doing. As one example.
See, that is everything that I'm talking about, what you just said. Bipartisan because you want it to pass, practical, not strictly political. So tell me how in the world we can get prescription drug prices down.
No, like someone says, there's not a silver bullet, but there's silver buckshot.
Okay.
And so you hit boom, 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 and everything adds up. One thing we just put in, one thing that pharmaceutical companies do, they've got a good drug, but they administer it by a little device. They will change the device every so many years so that there can't be a generic on the device.
To keep the patent on it?
Yeah, they have a patent on it, but instead of turning the handle to the right in order to engage to give the injection, you have to turn it to the left to engage to give the injection. That little bit of a change keeps a product from being imitated and avoids competition to lower the cost. So we just introduced legislation with a Democrat from Illinois that would begin to address, wait a second, you turn it to the right, you turn it to the left, it doesn't matter. It's still the same drug. You got to allow the generic to come in. You got to allow the competition to occur and to lower prices. Very practical, but it's kind of a way that the law has been manipulated.
You see so much about insulin these days and people not being able to afford it. Is that one of those instances?
That is one of those instances. Now, the insulin is both the device being changed, but also the rebates required by the pharmacy benefit managers. Now, all the attention that has been given to the middlemen, if you will, the PBMs, the middlemen, the insurance companies that are middlemen, they are now coming up with ideas on their own how to lower the cost dramatically. And so we're just pushing hard on that.
See, it would seem to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, pardon me if I'm wrong, but if I'm an insurance company paying for this, I'm going to negotiate the lowest price possible with the drug manufacturer. Is that being done now?
Well, think about it. The insurance company is not who is paying for this. The insurance company passes the bill on to either the business, the self-insured person, or the taxpayer.
I got you.
And so if you're the PBM, you actually make money. You get I think, like 2 to 3% of the total price. So you do better with a higher list price because your 2 to 3% on a higher list price gives you more absolute dollars. So they will argue that ultimately they're trying to lower the cost, but they actually do better with a higher list price.
Somebody texted in, I know we got natural gas to get to, but somebody texted in and said, please ask Senator Cassidy about the postcard tax form on this tax day. I was under the impression that it was just going to be a postcard. But is there any way we can ever simplify the tax code to where it will legitimately be a postcard? Fill out a couple of lines and you're done?
I don't know if it's going to be a postcard, but we did double the standard deduction. So whereas formerly people if I gave to my church or synagogue, I'd need to keep a list of receipts. And if I gave used clothes to Salvation Army, I kept a list of receipts. That's all gone. So it is much simpler than it used to be. And I'd have to keep track of how much taxes I paid for this and that. We doubled the standard of deduction to $20,000. Most people will no longer have to have, whatever the form would be in which you would list all your charitable contributions. I don't know about a postcard, but it's a lot simpler than it used to be.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Stanford and Yale. One of them's a school, and that's all I'll say now. Senator, we'll pick it up here when we come back, 10 to 9, traffic, WWL. 8:55, 5 till 9, WWL. I'm Tommy Tucker. Senator Bill Cassidy is with us. We're going to talk about Yale and Stanford in a second, and I'll bet everybody thinks they know what it's about, but it isn't. Let's talk about liquefied natural gas first.
Yeah, liquefied natural gas
Hello? It's 8:55.
Jobs.
All right, Senator, you cut out there for a second. Let's start all over with liquefied natural gas.
Yeah, liquefied natural gas is being shipped out of southwest Louisiana and perhaps out of southeast Louisiana across the world. That is a great development. It creates jobs in Louisiana. It creates an increased tax base. It also, by the way, as it pumps around the world, disrupts the economies of, say, Iran and Russia. And lastly, it replaces coal, which means it lowers greenhouse gases as our gas is used in place of, say, Chinese coal. So lots of good things. We're working hard to expedite the permitting of the construction of these LNG export terminals to make sure this happens in a faster way.
Now, I mentioned Yale and Stanford. A lot of people are thinking Lori Loughlin. It's got nothing to do with that at all. Yale, the university, Stanford, an investment Ponzi scheme. I guess let's start with the college, Senator.
Yeah, so Yale, the law school had scheduled to have a speaker who had worked on the masterpiece cake decision. That is where the fellow that came up with the cake, it was decided he had the religious right not to make a cake for a gay couple. Now, whatever you think of the decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the baker. The lawyer that argued that was going to go speak at Yale, and there's, as you might guess, protest. And so the Yale dean of law school came out with a set of decisions effectively discriminating against religious students, saying that if you graduate and you go work for, say, a synagogue, we're not going to help you financially. But by the way, if you go work for someone who actually promotes anti-Semitism, yes, you would continue to be qualified to receive money. Similarly for Catholic organizations. It is wrong. So I and others are sending letters to the Yale Law School saying, wait a second, you're a law school. What about the First Amendment? Are we going to discriminate against those who wish to practice their faith? And so that's kind of where we're going with this. We're waiting to hear back. So far, their answers have been, as you might guess, legalistic. But I think there's a principle here. You should not be discriminated as long as you have a lawful expression of your religious faith.
Yeah, I think the key phrase there, a lot of people don't realize whether you like it or not, the Supreme Court has ruled on it. Tell me about Stanford Ponzi Scheme because, doing some research on this, Bernie Madoff got the headlines, but this is pretty serious as well.
Yeah, there was a guy, Stanford, that was the name of the firm, but also his last name, Alan Stanford, ripped off a lot of people on the Gulf Coast, a lot of people, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. Right now there is a Swiss bank that has got about $140 million that the receivers are trying to get back to distribute to those people in Louisiana, Texas, and elsewhere who had their life savings stolen. Now, I had a meeting with folks from the bank last week, and of course they're going to make their case. One case they made, though, which actually rings a little true to me, is that the receiver, by filing lots of lawsuits they had no hope of winning, have kind of frittered away the amount of money that would come back to those who have been defrauded. So we're trying to look both at the bank to get them to release the dollars, but also the receiver to make sure that they are acting in the best interest of the victims, not of the law firm, if you follow the distinction that I'm making.
I do. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your time. Hope you have a great Easter.
Thank you, Tommy. You too.
It's Bill Cassidy, U.S. Senator. We're going to take a break. Come back.